want people to come in?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Scott Lee. I'm alcoholic.
Hey, Scott.
I'd like to open with a few moments of silence to each in our own way invite God to join us in this meeting again. Amen. So we started off with the idea of a friendly God. Well, we started off with the idea that we were in big trouble and we couldn't solve this ourselves because we tried. I think quitting drinking is not difficult. I've done it over 2,000 times. And the trick isn't how do I not start again. For those who are new, that's not the mission here. The mission is to change you so you never want to start again. You may not be able to imagine that, but when I was new, I don't know if I would have believed that. I've been living it since December of '84. I'm sober since June of '84. I got a sponsor sometime in December of '84. I was somewhere in the step work the last time I wanted one, and life has happened to me since then. I have made way too much money. I've been up against bankruptcy. I've had 2 divorces, one I wanted and one I didn't. My daughter shot herself and survived. I chatted with her last night. She's doing just fine. I was diagnosed with cancer in my throat. They took my teeth. They did so much radiation to my throat that I'm on a liquid diet. Through all of that, I have not wanted to alter my feelings again through alcohol or any of alcohol's cousins. That's what's available here. This is not, if you're new and you're just hanging on, hang. But that's not the long-term plan. The long-term plan is happy, joyous, and free. The long-term plan is that old stuff ain't calling my name anymore. Alcohol and some other things were never my problem. They were my answer. Made me taller, smarter, better looking. They did all that stuff for me. So when I try to put them down, I can't leave them down because they were not my problem. They were my answer. So if I'm going to put the old answer down and leave it down, I'm going to have to pick up a new answer that's better than the old one, and it is. And it comes for different people at different places, somewhere in the step work. I'm a big believer in meetings. Meetings are really important. It's not where the magic is. The magic is in the step work. In the forward to the 3rd edition, Roman numeral 22, which is going to be XXII, has what I believe is the single most important phrase in the entire book. The 3rd paragraph begins, the basic principles of the AA program, it appears, hold good individuals of many different lifestyles, just as the program has brought recovery to those of many different nationalities. Now here's the phrase. The 12 steps that summarize the program. What that says is the steps I see on the wall are a summary. That's the Cliff Notes. If that was the whole program, we'd have a pamphlet instead of a book. And I see people trying to take the steps off the wall to get off the wall program. So we're here to talk in depth about this particular one, which is the step that changed my life the most was step 4. The 3 steps I was the most terrified of, 4, 5, and 9, were the ones that did me the most good. I was just wrong about them. I looked at them and said, they're going to punish me. I was wrong. You are too. So I'm going to talk about step 4. The first piece is you better get a friendly God or you're not going to be able to do it. So get away from the old angry God idea. The second thing I would tell you is that those terrible things in your past are not who you are. That's who you're not. Because if that's who you really are, you're still out there doing it. It doesn't make you sick to think about it. We will teach you here how to quit doing who you're not, how to repair the damage for having done who you're not, and who you really are will emerge from the ashes like the phoenix. That's not poetry. That's what we do every day here. That's the nuts and bolts of what this thing comes down to. A friend of mine says, God forgives me for everything I ever did, and he loved me while I was doing it. My God got bigger that day. My God got a lot bigger that day. I think giving yourself the assignment of doing step 4 is a mistake because it's too big. If you give yourself the assignment to do step 4, you're in position to judge yourself harshly until it's complete. Better to agree with your sponsor on how much time and when you should work on your 4th step each week. When I get a new guy to sponsor, normally what I ask him for is 3, or depending on what I know about his life, ballpark, 3 30 to 45-minute periods a week, and I want him to call me on Sunday and schedule it. And Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is not a schedule. Monday, 9 p.m. to 9:45 p.m., that is the schedule. And like anything else important on your schedule, it's not subject to cancellation. Could get moved. I was planning for 2 o'clock Saturday afternoon. I didn't know my son had a ball game. Went to the ball game, slipped it to 8 o'clock that night. I don't need a phone call on that. Of course you did. Of course you did. But if you can agree with your sponsor on how much time you should spend each week on it, and you do that, you can feel good about yourself while you're in process. And we felt bad about ourselves long enough. The next thing I want to tell you, maybe the most important thing about step 4, is you have my permission to do a lousy one. Get in there and do a horrible 4-step. Get in there and just do a rotten one. Because if you have to do it perfectly, you can't pick up the pen. And most of us are bankrupt idealists, and if we can't do it perfectly from the gate, we don't do it at all. You have my permission to do a lousy 4-step. We are not saving a special alcove at Akron in the AA Hall of Fame for your 4-step. In addition to which, we do not give a trophy every year for the best 4-step, and this is the trophy you are not going to get. Okay? This is a trophy you ain't getting. For those of you too far back to read it, it says 4-step trophy never awarded. Your name ain't going on this thing. All right? And you can have your picture made with it later if you like, by the way. I took this thing to the Soviet Union 3 times, and they will have their pictures made with this. Believe me, I didn't think we were ever going to get out of that one. It's a whole nother story. But if you want your picture made with the 4-step trophy, I'd be glad to do it. It'll be up here later. So the idea is get in there and do a poor one. Because if you're one of the ones that means it, if you're really going to do this thing in less than a year, you're going to be taking a newcomer through this again. You go with them. Whatever you missed, we'll pick up. We're going to get the big pieces. We're going to get enough to keep us moving. I'm going to turn it over to Matt, as hard as it is for me to quit talking.
Well, thanks, Scott. Yeah, we're also going to be passing around this basket here for questions. Feel free to peel off a piece of paper, drop a question in there, and
easy question.
Easy, yeah, please, easy.
Yeah.
I'm going to start over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a sign-up sheet going around. It's not so everybody's going to call you, but if you put your phone, the cell phone number, you'll receive a text of this recording that big old guy up there under the Twitch stand. That's the purpose of the sign-in sheet, to get the recording. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Awesome. Yeah, as Scott had highlighted, this is a vital step. That one that I too balked at first, was a little intimidated. Given my current location, I wasn't really trying to put down any information that was too revealing on things where I was.
You mean like something the judge didn't already know about?
That's right, exactly.
Okay.
And that's another conversation for another day as well. But this exercise is a lot more than just writing. That's another idea I had that I had to get rid of. Although it is first. It says, though the decision which we made in 3 was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us.
He's at the top of 64.
At the top of 64, yeah. Our liquor was but a symptom. So we had to get down to causes and conditions. And that's what's you had said, Scott, is that, the liquor and all of its cousins were just a symptom. I take that off the table and I'm still wacko without a solution. I'm dehydrated. I have a unquenchable thirst through things of this other than alcohol. So I put that away and then I get down to business. It says that if we go a little bit further down on page 64, we're taking stock honestly. This consists of 3 inventories. There's a resentment, a fear, and a sexual misconducts or personal relations. The first of which is the resentment list. And it talks about resentment being the number 1 offender, that it destroys more alcoholics than anything else. Destroys. That's a key word there. Pretty powerful. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have not only been mentally and physically ill, we've also been spiritually sick. Good news here, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. And it gives us specific directions here in dealing with these resentments. What do? We set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principals with whom we were angry. And that's a really easy way for me to start this exercise. Thankfully, like, I had a sponsor. Well, let me take a step back. My very first 4-step was done, I didn't have a composition notebook, but I was given a 2-week window to have this done in 2 weeks. This was before I was working with Scott and some of his predecessors. And so, like, you know, a good alcoholic, I waited until day 13 and a half. And I'm like, I got to get down to, didn't have any time to ask questions or anything like this, but I wanted it to be perfect. So I went through and did an F- attempt. It was good enough. It was good enough. Since then, through good sponsorship, I've been given these composition notebooks, and the reason I love this format is because you can open up the page, and when it talks about here, it gives us 4 assignments. First, like I said, we listed the people or institutions, principals with whom we were angry. That makes a great column 1. So if you can see this here, you open it up to 2 blank pages and you draw a line down the middle of each page vertically. So then you should end up with 4 columns. So we have who I'm angry at. I'm angry at. On the example on page 65, it has the same with 3 columns. I'm resentful at, being the first one on the left. Then we ask ourselves why we were angry. What's the cause? There's my column 2. And it says, in most cases, we found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, or personal relations, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore. We were burnt up. And on our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations which had been interfered with? Well, that there is our 3rd column. Now, a key word here that I needed to be shown through good sponsorship was list. There's a difference, as Scott beautifully says, between a list and a paragraph. And when it comes to a list, especially with the cause, what they did, I need to be clear and concise. And I believe it's 19 words.
It is.
19 words or less. If I can't summarize the hurt within 19 words or less, then I need to call my sponsor. And that prevents me from going down this trail of self-pity and woe is me. Fact-finding, fact-facing mission. Remember, let's go back to what this assignment is all about. So I write this down, and then I put what part of it affects myself. And I'm running out of space when it comes to affects my, so I come up with like a little acronyms, for each one of these things. But I notice that fear is a commonality through a lot of them, which is great because that's the next inventory. But before we get there, at the end of this, at the bottom of page 65, we went back through our lives. I personally like going chronologically. I start from as far back as I can remember and then come to present day. Other guys that I've worked with go back in time from present day to the back. There's no right or wrong way here. That's what worked for me. And when it says nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty, that's it. And my very first 4-step was as thorough and honest as I could be at that point in time. And subsequent 4 steps were, to the best of my present circumstance. So not, it's like what Scott had said. This isn't an exercise in perfection. So as soon as I can get that out of my head, that, I pray into this and I pray out. I ask God to help, guide my pen and help me to be as thorough and honest as possible. And I begin to write. And I sit down 30 minutes or so, 30, 45 minutes, however long it is, to let the pen do the work. I'm just going to be a channel in this. I'm not going to try to have an opinion on the things that have happened because, like Scott said, these aren't me. This is the stuff that I've been carrying with me. It's that 95-pound ruck that I've been carrying that I hadn't even known I've been carrying, and I'm trying to get rid of. in order to let the sunlight flow in. Because like I was told early on, the old man will drink again. And I was like, well, that's good because I'm 23 years old and I got some time. But what they said is like the old Matt will drink again. And so I had to be open to this experience. And writing is therapeutic. Putting it down on paper, I'm a big believer of pen to paper. This is the way I've done it. I'm not saying that it's wrong to do it digitally. I'm sure, in some circumstances, that's the only resource that that someone has. For me personally, there is something very powerful about putting it down. So now I have my first 3 columns.
Yeah.
You
Let
wanna
me take
jump
that,
in?
yeah.
Yeah.
I do a little bit different from what he does. I don't give the second directions until they finish one. And I like to write it like he's got here, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is one page. We're gonna do a 4-column inventory. And you begin by just column 1, you write one name and skip a line, write a name, skip a line, write a name, skip a line. Get to the bottom, don't write over here. Turn the page and write 1, 2, 3, 4, because you're gonna need this later. And that will give you room to do the second column when you get to it. But I want them to finish the first column. The book called for a list, and lists are vertical. If you work across the page, it makes these resentments tend to flare. If you work vertically, it's much more analytical. And so I think that's the best way to do it. 19 words is what Mr. Brown got, and he was doing an awful lot of stuff. So that's the layout. I'll tell you one more thing about step 4. There's no surprises. You were there. It ain't gonna like we're gonna find something you don't know. There's nothing to be afraid of here. Nothing to be afraid of. And then for me, the important portions of step 4 are not about writing. If all you do is write a 4th step, you will have missed it completely. A 4th step is a series of lists, observations, and prayers covering resentment, fear, and sexual misconduct, as Matt was saying. And it is the observations and prayers that I found to be life-changing. That's where the magic is in step 4. If you take the step off the wall, you won't come anywhere close to that. I'd like to recommend the actual 4th step right here in this book. On page 66, it says, it is plain. So I ask my new guy these things as questions, page 66. Now, he's written his first column. We've got a list of everybody and everything he's ever been angry with, ever. Even if you think you've forgiven him, I don't care. Put it down. Yeah, I know it's a long list. A good list is somewhere between 150 and about 300, typically. The shortest list I ever saw that was complete was about 40. It was a young kid. He just wasn't that mad. The longest list I've seen is 1,200. I've seen that twice. I'm not kidding. Yeah, so put it down. And then column 2, 19 words or less, what did they do? It doesn't start out, it was a rainy Wednesday afternoon. No. It says, screwed me in a business deal. High school football coach, didn't play me as much as I deserved. Left me for another guy, left me for another guy, left me for another guy. There'll be patterns. And then column 3 is a 5-part multiple choice across the top of page 65. Self-esteem, security, ambitions, personal sex relations. Some will only get 1, some get 2, 3, some get all 5. Some you may not be able to figure out. Skip it and ask your sponsor. And that'll help you see it with self-esteem. I've done, I think, 28 of these. On the first 25, self-esteem got the most ink. On the last 3, it's been security. I don't know that matters. That's just an observation. Page 66, this is where the action begins. There's no writing here, but this is where the magic happens in step 4. It lies between the 3rd and 4th columns. It's plain in life includes deep resentment, leads only to futility and unhappiness. Have you ever known anybody who was happy, joyous, free, and full of deep resentment? I don't think I've ever seen that combination. So I ask him, have you? Precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? Did you ever sit in class and hate somebody when you could have been listening and learning something? Did you ever lay awake at night and plan what you were going to do to them when you could have been getting some badly needed rest? Did you squander hours that might have been worthwhile? Is that true for you? Well, the alcoholic whose hope, now I'm going to tell me what my hope is. The maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience. Maintenance means 2 things. It means to maintain and to not losing something I've already got. It also means maintenance in the same sense that I maintenance my vehicle. I rotate the tires. I got the right pressure in them. I change the oil on time. I vacuum it out. I maintenance my spiritual experience through daily prayer and meditation, reading spiritual literature, attending events like this, sponsoring, being sponsored, letting people in traffic, cleaning up my language, saying please and thank you, doing the things you've taught me. It says this business of resentment is infinitely grave. Infinitely grave. We just threatened your life. We're going to do it 7 times on this page. We found that it is fatal. I ran into the guy that took me through this work. I was sober 6 years. I hadn't seen him in 3. And I said, do you remember? And I named a guy. And he said, if somebody you sponsor commits suicide, you'll always remember them. I said, I can't find the difference between me and him. We were both sober a little over 2 years. I saw him many times each week at our home group. We had the same sponsor, you. And he drove home from a meeting one night, sober, pulled into his garage and hit the button and dropped the door and left his car running and took his own life, sober 2 years. And I cannot find a difference between me and him. Is there a difference? He said, yes, there is. I could not get him to do a 4-step, and he died of resentment and killed him. I thought he was exactly right. Every time you saw this guy, he could not wait to tell you what some rotten SOB had just done to him. He was a victim all the time, and the victims don't make it. We are in the process of stepping out of the victim role. This is the beginning of that right here. It's what we're doing here. It says, we found it is fatal. I know his name because we're being recorded. I don't say it, but I've got it in my mind right now. For when harboring such feelings, not when having, but when harboring. Harbor means to give a safe place to nurture. I'm okay if I have resentments if I'm not harboring. We're going to tell us how to not harbor here in a few minutes. Shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit, and sadly, if alcohol returns, we drink again. Well, that's to drink is to die. Oh, we just threatened your life again. If we were to live, all right, so this portion is only for the ones who want to live. Everybody else can take a short break. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger, the grouch, and the brainstorm, but not for us. It's one of the 2 most misunderstood sentences in the book. I did some digging. In the mid-1940s, an ad executive on Madison Avenue named Osborne wrote a book about how his team put together an ad campaign. And what they do is they'd set a product out here, say, okay, let's hear it. Somebody said, well, maybe this. And so I said, well, that makes me think this, it makes me think this, and somebody else to come up with what they used. Osborne laid this process, brainstorming, has absolutely nothing to do with the word brainstorm written on this page. I dig out a 1930s dictionary, I look up brainstorm. It says transient violent mental outburst. That's rage. Has nothing to do with the creative process. So brainstorm and rage mean the exact same thing. So you put it in context, there's 2 kinds of anger, the grouch or the slow burn, or rage, the brainstorm. I had no idea. It helped me a lot when someone told me that. They may be the dubious luxury for normal men. For alcoholics, these things are poison. I wonder what poison does. We turn back to the list for it held the key to the future. Does that mean if I don't find the key to the future, I don't have a future? Yeah, it does. You just died. It was subtle, but you're dead again. Prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. Different from what? Imagine, or remember, if you'd prefer, a courtroom. We're sitting at the prosecution table. We've got column 1, the accused. Column 2, the crime. Column 3, how the crime affected our poor innocent victim. If we're going to look at it from an entirely different angle, I have to walk across the courtroom and sit at the defense table and say, wait a minute. If I'd had his life, if my father had, if my mother had, if my siblings had, if my neighbors had, if my classmates had, if my spouse had, if, could I, in the depths of my disease, on my worst spiritual hair day, have done what he did? I can't speak for you, I'll speak for me, and the answer is yes. For me, there was no bottom. You heard of the 10 Commandments? I'm 0 for 10. I'm not trying to impress you. You give that some thought. Pretty serious stuff. There is no bottom. This is the beginning of the forgiveness process, which I believe is the single most important thing I've done in my entire life, not just in my recovery. And it's why I'm so excited about this, because this is where my life changed. This is where I got that spiritual awakening. And it began with these observations. I've got to acknowledge that I'll look at it from a different angle. It says we began to see that the world of people really dominated us. Yeah, I can see that. In that stage, the wrongdoers of others, fancy or real. Fancy, does that mean just some of this just happens inside my head? Yeah, that's exactly what that means. Had the power to actually kill, guess who died? How could we escape? We saw it through some must be mastered, but how? Do you see that? We just killed you 7 times on this page with your resentments. Do you see that they must be mastered? I hope so. I've been a sales rep for a long time. A good salesman never mentions price till he's established value. We just killed you 7 times with resentments. Is that enough value for you to pay a high price? I hope so, because you may not like it. I didn't. It says we could not wish them away any more than alcohol. I think Bill knew something a lot of people didn't know. If you look up, there are 2 kinds of verbs in the English language, transitive and passive. Transitive is something I do. I can move this cup over here, something I do. Passive, something happens to me. It's raining. I go outside, I get wet. So transitive I do, passive happens to me. You look up the verb to forgive in your dictionary, it says it's transitive, something I do. That's incorrect. Forgiveness is a state of spirit, and I can't change my spirit. Forgive is not something I can do, it's something I have to open up to receive. And that's what this process is about. Did you ever say or hear anybody say, well, I forgive, I'll never forget? That ain't forgive, kids. Forgive is not something I can do. So we're in the process of learning how to open up to receive the gift of not hating them anymore. And that's why I get so excited about this. It says, this was our course, we realized, look at my hands please, we realized. I can know something, head knowledge, but when I realize it, it becomes heart knowledge. It's a whole different level. We realize. People who wronged us or perhaps spiritually sick, I'm not going to call on anybody. I want you to bring to mind the 2 worst things you ever did. I'll give you a minute. Got a couple? Weren't you spiritually sick when you did that? Weren't you? Had you been walking in the sunlight of the Spirit in conscious contact with this loving, laughing God who invented smallmouth bass, vanilla ice cream, and sex? Good job. That guy. Had you been walking with him, could you have done that? Could you? Would you have thought of it? Probably not. So you were spiritually sick when you did the worst things you ever did. Can you grant that these people were perhaps spiritually sick when they did this to you? This is the beginning of the forgiveness process. And what I have the guys I sponsor do is sit quietly, and we're going to do sessions, 30, 45-minute sessions on step 4 without a pen in your hand. Sit quietly and talk to God about those 2 worst things you ever did and how much you crave his forgiveness. And then pray the list once. First name on the list, George. God, please help me realize that George is not a rotten SOB. He was just spiritually sick when he did that to me. Do not rehearse what George did. Substitute the word that. Second name on the list, Mary. God, please help me realize that Mary is not a rotten human being. She was just spiritually sick when she did that to me. Third name on the list, high school football coach. Please help me realize that coach was, You know, when I went to practice, I didn't practice that hard. And there were guys on our team that had better talent at what we were doing than I did. And the fact is, he probably played me more than I deserved. Check that one off. Fancied or real. You may find some fancied ones as you do that. I didn't ask you to mean it. You can't. I asked you to pray it once. That's all. Top of 67. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they like ourselves were sick too. The symptom of their spiritual sickness is column 2. It's what they did. The way they disturbed me is column 3. And then the great truth, they, like ourselves, were sick too. We said that step 4 is a series of lists, observations, and prayers. Here comes a prayer. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience we were cheerfully around a sick friend. I'm praying for myself there. God help me show them tolerance, pity, and patience. Praying for myself. On page 164, my favorite misquote is that more will be revealed. You can't tell me what page that's on because it ain't in there. But it does say God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. And that happened, I believe, to a woman named Wynne Laws, who wrote the story Freedom from Bondage. We're going to page 551 in your 4th edition. I'm going to make a couple of observations. At the bottom, it says, one morning I had to realize I had to get rid of it. It's a resentment against her mother is what she's referencing. For my reprieve, a reprieve is a stay of execution or a delay of punishment. My reprieve was running out, and if I didn't get rid of it, I was going to get drunk. I didn't want to get drunk anymore. My prayers that morning, I asked God to point out to me some way to be free of this resentment during the day. A friend of mine brought me some magazines to take to a hospital group I was interested in. I looked through them. A banner across one featured an article by a prominent clergyman in which I caught the word of resentment. Let's look at the sequence of events. 1, she said something about herself that needs work. Not something wrong with her, there's nothing wrong with any of us. Some things could use some work. Say something about herself that needs work. 2, she prays about it. 3, she gets involved doing something for somebody else. 4, her answer falls out of the sky on her. It's a predictable sequence of events. We see it all the time if you look for it. Continuing on 552, he said in effect, if you have resentment you want to be free of, now we just killed you with it 7 times. If you have resentment you want to be free of, if you pray for the person or thing you resent, you'll be free. Ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you'll be free. Ask for their health, their prosperity, their happiness, you'll be free. Even when you don't really want it for them and your prayers are only words that you don't mean it, go ahead and do it anyway. It's going to go on to say it'll work in 2 weeks. Not with 168 resentments, it ain't going to work in 2 weeks. Well, you plan to live to be 190 years old anyway, you got plenty of time. Commit the time to it. Sit quietly and so what I do is I add those prayers together, because on that prayer on 552, I'm praying for the other person. On this one here in 67, I'm praying for myself. A friend of mine tells a story. I think I'm going to cut it short. What he says is I leave a mark everywhere I go, and I want that mark to be made of love. That column 2, somebody else has made a mark, an unloving mark in my life. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlay it with 2 loving marks. One is praying for myself that I might show him tolerance, pity, and patience. And the other is I'm going to pray stuff for him. And I'm going to erase that. And this is what it will look like. Sitting for 30 to 45 minutes, first 2 or 3 minutes, inviting God to the process and talking to him about those 2 worst things I ever did. And then start praying the list. First name on the list, George. God, please help me grant George the same tolerance, pity, and patience I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. And I also pray that he doesn't go bald, that he gets promoted at work, he wins the Tennessee lottery, his kids go to school on scholarship and don't give him any trouble. He gets a new mansion, a new convertible, a big boat. He's healthy as a horse. His wife is a fabulous lover and chases him around the house all the time. His lawn is grows lush and green, but grows so slowly he only has to mow it once a year. Be creative. I didn't ask you to mean it. You can't. My sponsor explained to me, he said, these old angers, it's what we're talking about here. It's like ice around your heart. And the ice has a thickness based on how severe the events were, how long ago it happened, how much you've nurtured them. And what you're going to do here is you're going to hold the icy heart up to the sunlight of the Spirit. Sunlight will melt ice. The sunlight always wins. It's a question of time. The sunlight has the power too, based on how close you can hold it and how long, and the sunlight always wins. The only question is, are you willing to do the work? He said, because what you really want is mercy for yourself and justice for everybody else. And the package is justice for everybody or mercy for everybody. And you are part of everybody and you get to choose. And I can't face justice. And when I chose mercy for them, I chose it for me. Because I cannot face it. That's what this is about. And I don't care how long this takes. I just don't care. And I will hold somebody on this for months. And I want him to schedule with me every Sunday. I want at least 3 periods a week. Every time you think about one of these people, you do this. You don't ever say anything negative about anybody, period, especially anybody on this list. And I want you in prayer all the time. And what this first guy I worked with that had 1,200 of these, prayed his entire list 2.5 times before he checked off the first one. I kept saying, I just don't care. Just don't care. This is going to work. You're just going to keep doing it. I ran into him almost 2 years ago, and his list is complete. Because what you do is you pray those things, and then you ask yourself this question, do I mean it, yes or no? Not, do I know I'm supposed to mean it? Not, am I trying to mean it? Not, it's best for me to mean it? Does Scott want me to mean it? Do I really hope that great stuff happens for George, yes or no? If the answer is no, go to the next name. If the answer is yes, put a check mark, go to the next name. If you get to the end, start over if the ones that aren't checked. If I sponsor, we do this so they're all checked, and I do not care how long it takes. But I want you to schedule. I want to keep you in process here. This will work. The sunlight always wins. It always wins. The only question is, will you bring some willingness to the party? Those people that you have that old anger for can't feel it, and it will kill you dead. It will absolutely destroy your life. So your choices are drink alcohol, take drugs, take your own life, or find a way to forgiveness. I'd like to recommend that forgiveness is a pretty good choice. That's what this is about. So forgiveness is something I do, it's something I receive. And the way I know I've received it is when I pray all that good stuff for George and really hope it happens for him. It will take some time. Be at peace with that. If you start checking them off pretty fast, I'm going to be worried about you. That's not usually the way that works. It's going to take some time. That ice has a thickness. But as you start checking them off, like their second or third time through the list, halfway through, you start checking them, think, gee, I really mean that for them? What's going to happen is other people are going to see a change in you. It will be visible. And they're going to say, have you lost weight? And the answer is, yes, I have. Because that stuff is weighing heavily on your soul. It weighed heavily on mine. This is the path to a new freedom. Talk about a new freedom. The old freedom was 4 shots of Cuervo Gold so I could come out and play. The new freedom is happy, joyous, and free. And I'm not mad at you anymore. That is a phenomenal gift. Through this process, I am no longer angry with some people who abused me as a child, for some older boys who sexually abused me when I was in my teens, for a guy that beat me out of over $100,000 in 1985. I'm just okay. What this process, this forgiveness process does is it emotionally disconnects me from all of your mistakes in the past. And now they're facts. I still got them. I also was born in Georgia. It's just a fact because I've been emotionally disconnected. It is a phenomenally different way to live, to have that poison literally dug out. That's what this is here. We're literally digging the poison out of your soul so that you can be free to blossom into who you've always really been. We're not here to change you into anything. You're already everything you ever needed to be. You just didn't know it. And we're here to help you quit doing who you're not so you can become who you really are. And that's what this process is about. We're not asking you to approve of what they did. I disapprove of what, especially for those of you, if you were abused as a child, I violently disapprove of that. That is a horrible thing, and shame on them. And it breaks my heart that happened to you. It wasn't right, and it's never going to be right. And it's a sick place, and it's a sick person that will do that kind of thing to a child. And it was not your fault in any way, and I'm so sorry that happened to you. Now, do you hear me? It's really important. I'm not asking you to approve of it. I disapprove of it. But I cannot afford the price of hating them. We close a lot of meetings with a prayer. And one of the phrases in that prayer is, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive. I believe what that says is, God, if I don't forgive them, don't you forgive me. I'm asking to be graded by my own standards. I have consequently relaxed my standards. I am 80 years old. I should not be stuck in this body a lot longer. And on that day, I cannot afford for my soul to stand naked before my Creator hating one of his other children. I can't pay that price. And yet forgiveness is not something I could do. But through what we just talked about, I was able to open up to receive the gift of not hating them anymore. Did you notice when I talked about those people that harmed me, that my demeanor did not change? It's because they're just facts now. I've been disconnected from them. You want to follow that?
Thanks, Scott. Well, no, that's very, very well said. I'm going to continue on. After we've done the prayers, after we have check boxes, check marks next to each of the names, then
One more thing, I'm sorry. You got something so bad you're sure it won't work. I worked with the man and watched him forgive the man that killed his son. If you can trump that, we'll talk about how it might not work. But you can't even get my attention until you get past that one. Okay? That's how powerful this is.
after we've checked the names, we can go back to the list. Putting out of our minds the wrongs others have done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. See, it's not until that I receive that forgiveness that I can actually look, put out of my mind the wrongs that they've done. Because until then, it's all about them. It's all about, and it's all about me and what they've done to me. Then I can ask these questions, answer these questions. Where have I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? And though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. And this is this is where I wouldn't recommend burning your 4-step, because this list here, what I've just mentioned, will turn into my 8-step list, with some modifications, maybe adding a couple names. But I found it to be very important. It gave me a head start later down the road. Just speaking from my experience, I definitely had a few of those names that were not as easy. The process worked eventually, and then it was with this one specific relationship where I had experienced a great deal of pain. The one that I had mentioned earlier about at around 6 years, wanting to check myself into a hospital because of my mental health. I realized I just had this piece that they were sick. That was all it took. It's just this, like, the repetition of this prayer that I didn't believe, that I couldn't really muster up even the words at first to pray. Just realized that, you know what, they were a sick person, and they acted as a sick person would have acted, and a great freedom came from this. We go into the fear. You have anything else on resentments?
I want to echo what he said, is I can't do column 4 until I complete the work between column 3 and 4, the observations and prayers. Until the prayers have worked, I can't see what they did. I can't see what I did. And what this does is it washes the lens of my soul so that I can see the truth. That's what this is about. Yeah, go for it.
Talks about fear, and fear, as we had noted in the third column of the resentment inventory, for me was very repetitive, and a lot of the resentments that I was carrying were just run through with fear of being alone, fear of being this rejection, fear of what were they going to think of me, my reputation, my my standing. Just this word, as I look back, it predates my alcoholism. It predates my first drink, I should say. I was driven by 100 forms of fear as early as I can remember. I would be up late at night as a kid crying because my dad traveled, and I would just come up with these stories in my head that he wasn't going to come home, or his plane was going to crash, or some just off the wall stuff. I don't even know where I came up with half of the things that are going on in my head. But it was an evil and corroding thread, and the fabric of our existence was shot through with it. Set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. This is where, I can have a thought about a situation. Oh, she's with, somebody else, okay? And I'll start acting out on that fear, giving her a reason to, to go be with somebody else, because I'm so entrenched and blinded by this fear that I will actually act them out, and they bring me these misfortunes I feel like I didn't deserve. And I'm the one, when I look back at it, when I put these things down on black and white, I see that I'm the one that started them in the beginning. When it comes to reviewing the fears, we put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. That's important. New inventory. So I can borrow for the ones that I listed in my resentment inventory, but then I also have other fears. We ask ourselves why we had them, and was it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Well, I put down the fears, whether they have resentment in connection or not. Some of them are those like the fear of abandonment, like the fear of financial, of being broke, of being, sober, the fear of everyone dying around me, and all of these fears. Then there's also those resentments with fear of heights, fear of snakes, fear of, I put down anything. I put down all of the things that I'm afraid of. It talks about this. This is some of my favorite paragraphs in the entire book, because I'd been driven by these fears. They were driving the show. I didn't even realize it. And then it says, well, perhaps there's a better way. We think so. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns. And just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. So as far as this list, what I do is I write the fear down: snakes, heights, etc., abandonment, death, etc. And then the assignment that I was given is to pray on each of these fears and to say, God, help me to see that if I was completely dependent on you, I would not have this fear.
Yeah.
And I go through the list and I pray. And there has not been one fear that I could say, oh, well, that one didn't work. And if so, then I would pray it again. Help me to see that if I'm totally dependent on the infinite God of love that I've defined in step 2, that doesn't make, mistakes, that's created me as one of His kids, that if I'm totally dependent on you, then this fear doesn't exist, because my fears are all outside of me, here and now. They're always in the future. And if I was to get honest, most of them don't ever come to fruition. Of course, if we were to pause and look back and see some of the things that we were actually afraid of. Now, certainly, I don't really like snakes. So I'm not going to go crawl under a house and pull one out. That's okay. They got people that do that. God has provided, a way. And that's the beautiful thing. Is just to the extent that I humbly rely on Him, does He enable me to match calamity with serenity? Calamity will come. It's promised in Bill's story. Trials and low spots are ahead. But we're able to match these with serenity, quiet in the storm. And that's what I never had. And that's what I continue to grow, and I learn a lot from you and watching how you guys have gone through trials in low spots. And then when I'm starting to go through it, early sobriety is no different. There was a guy who came up to me at my very first home group. I was probably 60 days in, and he was came up to my chest and was about as wide as the door frame, just built like a tank. And he's like, "Hey, are you new?" And I was like, "Who's this guy?" And told him I was, and he's like, "Well, welcome, hang on. Sobriety's one hell of a ride." And he just walked away. And I never saw the guy again. But he was so true. It is truly one heck of a ride.
A couple of things. The typical resentment list is 150, 200, something like that. The fear list is dramatically shorter, 15, 20. So don't give yourself a brain hernia trying to come up with 300 fears, okay? And let me talk about a fear. It's a thing that grips you. Got into a discussion one time with a guy, and he said he looked both ways before he stepped off the curb because he had to get a fear of getting run over by a bus. Now, that guy may well have busophobia. I look both ways before I step off the curb because I think that's what intelligent people do, and doesn't have anything at all to do with fear. So that fear is that thing that grips you. It's so important. And also it said, we trust infinite God rather than find ourselves. We're in the world to play the role He assigns. Roman numeral 16, XVI. Bill Wilson is about to leave the Oxford groups, and he's going to take some, but not all, of what he's learned from them. About 8 lines down, it's just the second page of forward to the second edition. Though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford groups, he was convinced of the need for moral inventory, confession of personality defects, restitution to those harmed, helpfulness to others. This is the piece I want to get to. And the necessity, I wonder if that's important, the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God. I got here like most of us do, I think kind of pretty much believing there was a God and not having a higher power. It is as I learn that healthy dependence that I have a higher power. That's what we're talking about here. And this thing that he just read about, I said, we're in the world to play the role he assigns. That's the first step. I'm not in management anymore. I've been assigned a role. That's the bad news. The good news, it's a great role, and I'm perfectly designed for it. And it says, just the extent we do as we think he would have us. I don't always know what God wants me to do next. This is what I've discovered. If I'm trying to do what God wants me to do, what I think he wants me to do, I still make mistakes. I make a finer quality of mistake than I ever made before. We have a term for that. We call it progress. Progress is making the same old mistake a little less often or making a new and finer quality of mistake. Anything beyond that's perfection. That's not the assignment. It's just not the assignment. Go ahead.
That next paragraph, we never apologize to anyone for depending on our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is a way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. And what that is, and if you're ever wondering like me, like what would he have us be? If we go to page 133, that's right, right across from 132. For like second line, first full sentence, we are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. Look at there. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. And this is a foundation for my freedom today. You know, when I was asked early on, like, you know, how much of this 4-step do I actually have to do? My sponsor said, Matt, how free do you want to be? And that's a question that I get to ask today. You know, fear today sounds like, or it looks like to me, you know, let's not try to solve problems that I don't have. Let's try to stay in my lane. Let's try to see what's going on. May you find him now. I've never been paralyzed by fear in the present moment. And it's always about how to get back to here, to today. And when I call my sponsor and I want to give him my laundry list of blah, 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 he's like, I don't hear today in anything you just said. It's like, but didn't you hear what I just said? And he's like, I need you to start saying today. And that's something that is so powerful for me, because that is the place that I can tap into the power, into the source. Without the source, I'm just like a wave in the ocean without a rudder. I'm getting blown wherever the wind is going to blow me that day. And I need direction. I get direction as a result of dependence on this power.
Just a couple other things from me. A girl in my home group told this story. She was in a bank getting ready to cash a check, and all of a sudden there's a hairy arm around her throat and a pistol in her ear, and she's a hostage in a bank robbery. What she said was, if she could have stayed in the moment mentally, she was really all right. Her fear was that he would kidnap her or that he would shoot her. But if she could have stayed in the moment, she was physically uncomfortable and not free to go about her business, but she was really okay. And that was when I got it. My fears are all in the future, all. The problem with the future is God isn't in the future. There's one who has all power, that one is God, may find him now. That wasn't when I find God, it's where. My God is the God of right here, right now, between the claps. I need to be right here, right now. My feet, which are very beautifully adorned, by the way, to match my tie, are smarter than my mind, because they never go into the past and they never go into the future. My mind does. I go into the past reliving victories, some of which may have actually happened, or I'm off in the future, figuring it out. Plan A and Plan B and Plan C. And what if they find out this and what if they, and I'm rarely right here, right now. Has required effort for me to get into the present and stay here. I have 3 vocabularies: speaking, praying, and thinking. I need to get the word today active in all 3 of those. The question isn't, what am I doing about my finances? It's the wrong question. The question is, what am I doing about my finances today? What am I doing about my relationship? What do you do about it today? Feel the difference in those questions? One day at a time, single hardest assignment I've ever been given is to simply be here. Stop trying to fix the rest of my life. I'd like to read the first paragraph in the big book chapter, Figuring It All Out, but we don't have that chapter. So I'm not going to be able to do that. And what that tells me is it ain't my job to figure it all out. My job is to get here and today where God is and stay here. And I'm just fine. I ask you a question right this second, just this moment. Everybody okay? Everybody all right? Okay. How about now? How about now? Yeah, get right here, right now. It's the magic. I had an experience. I was sober 5 years, and I was sitting at my desk typing one night, and all of a sudden I was in pain. And I was in pain I didn't know was available. I didn't know you could hurt like that and remain conscious. And I was being driven to the hospital, and it occurred to me, at step 3, I'd offered God my will in my life. I never had offered him my death, so I did, because I thought it was there. I said, I'm not asking to go, but if it's your will and my time, take me. My fear of death has been gone since then. I checked about a year ago. I didn't mean to. I'm on this liquid diet, and my best friend and I were double dating. We went to a Mexican restaurant, and I can eat hamburger if it's ground up really fine, if I take a very small bite and put a lot of liquid with it. So I was eating this beef enchilada, and I thought, well, I bet I could eat a piece of cheese. Well, I lost that bet. It stuck halfway down. It wouldn't go down, it wouldn't come up, and I couldn't breathe. It upset my friends very much. What flashed through my mind was, well, I guess I'm going to die in a Mexican restaurant. If you'll think about it, you know, death has got a bad reputation. Well, it really does. And if I think of myself as this body, it looks like a bad deal. When I think of myself as the spirit that inhabits the body, it changes everything. I now look at death as moving day. I'm going to move out of this worn out, pretty much, efficiency apartment into a universe and more. They tell me there's a storm on the planet Jupiter twice the size of Earth. I want to see it up close, and I want to know why it's there. And I want to visit some of the other civilizations I believe are strewn among the stars. I want to walk through the pearly gates and hug my mother again and tell her what a great mom she was. Death was invented by the God of love, and it is therefore good. And just because I can't control it doesn't mean it's bad. Just because a lot of people think it's bad, I don't believe that. I think it's moving. I think it's the great adventure. It's a great adventure. You know, if I think I'm short on anything on planet Earth, you know what I'm short on? Faith. Because if I got enough faith, I got enough of everything. Absolutely everything. And it said here at the bottom of page 68, and once we commence to outgrow fear. If I can outgrow fear, my guess would be fear is a lack of growth. I'm going to guess spiritual growth. It's just a guess. Can I break here?
Yeah.
We're going to take a 13-minute and 40-second break. I'll be on time. Go away. Go away.